Hey, I'm Pat, and in this video we'll be going over events in Roblox Studio and what they are, how to use them, things like that, right? So, I am kind of sick, so if I sound like I'm dying more than usual, that's the reason, but let's get into the actual video. So, an event is basically what it is, right? A lot of things in Roblox or in scripting are self-explanatory, but event is basically just an action or like something that happens inside a studio that can trigger code. So an example would be clicking a part, clicking a button, or like two parts touching each other, things like that. So the first thing we'll do is we're going to make a part in workspace, and we're going to make sure it's anchored so it doesn't disappear on us. But then we're going to add a click detector because we're going to be using click detectors for this video because they're pretty simple and kind of easy to start off with as far as events go. So we'll put a script inside of our part. The script doesn't actually matter where the script is as long as it's in somewhere that will run a server script, like a server script service or workspace. Those two places will work just fine. And we'll make a reference to our part, which is the parent of our script in this instance. You can also do workspace.part, you know, it's up to you. In case you have your script somewhere else, that might be easier to reference it that way. And we'll make a reference to our click detector by doing part.clickDetector because the click detector is a child of the part, right? And what we can do is we can type our detector, and the way you access an event, right, is you type the instance and then you click dot, or you put dot just like you're accessing the child or something, and then you'll see these little lightning bolts. These are all events. So we got mouse clicked, change, child added, ancestry change, descendant added. Some of these are kind of self-explanatory. You probably know what some of these do, like changed or child added. And it gives you a little bit of a description over here. And yeah, there's right mouse click, mouse hover, mouse enter, leave, whatever, right? So we're just going to go with mouse click for now, which is whenever the player left clicks on the part that the click detector, or the part that whenever the player left clicks on the parent of the click detector, will trigger the event. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use a method, and you can use methods on events as well. You can use methods like wait to wait for an event to be triggered, or you can use a method like connect. And what connect does is it connects the event to a function. So whenever the event is triggered, it will call the function, and the code inside the function will run from the function call, right? So that's what connect does. And we can either give the function name here, like say if we separately defined our function. If we separately defined our function here, we could just put our function name. You don't put the parentheses here because you're not calling the function. You just put the name, and it will make a reference to this function, which it will then call this function whenever this event is triggered. But you can also just define the function right here in the connect, right? And what you gotta do is make sure you have closing parenthesis after your end on the function, because you got a starting one here and you got an ending one here, and then these two will still be your parameter list right here. And a lot of events will also come with like parameters or that they return. Mouse click returns the player instance, so it returns the player that clicked the part. So and that's their player instance, which would be underneath the player service in Explorer, right? So it returns player, but there's other events that will return things like parts or other things that could be related to the event firing, which could be very useful. So we got the player, and what we can do now is inside of here we can do something like script.parent.color equals color3 from RGB, and we can make it change to a color like a blue. So whenever we click it, it will change to this color, right? So if we run it, give it a test real quick, see what happens. We go up to our part, and you see once we have our mouse actually changes to like a little click thing, and we click on it and it turns to blue like we told it to. Look at that. We're scripting geniuses. And you can also edit the click detector's properties to change, you know, the distance that you can trigger it from, and you can also change the cursor icon. So that's really how click detectors work. Nothing too complicated. Events aren't really too complicated, right? They just execute the code inside the function. So another thing I should go over, I guess, is nesting connections inside of functions, kind of. So whenever you make a connection to an event, it connects the function to the event. So whenever it runs this line of code, it will connect this event to this function. So you can see this line will only be run once, only a single time in the script, so there's only one connection being made to this event. But a common mistake some people do is, obviously you wouldn't be doing this, but sometimes people have like multiple events and they want to detect when one thing happens inside of like when another event has already happened, right? But they'll nest the connection like this, right? And what happens is whenever this function is called from this connection, it makes another connection to this event, right? Because every time this line is run, it makes a connection. So what's it doing is every time this detector is clicked, it's making another connection to this event. So that way, every time you click, it multiplies the connections, or it keeps adding more and more connections. So what we'll do is we'll add a print in here to kind of display that. So once we click it once, it doesn't work the first time, but we click it the second time because now we have that connection and it works. Sequence 1. Click it again. Now we got ×3, so it printed 2 times that time. Print it again. It printed 3 more times because it added another connection. Print it again. We got 10 times now. And you can see it'll just keep going up and up, and that is a very common problem for people. So there's multiple ways you can tackle this or change it. Obviously you're not going to be using multiple mouse click events inside of each other, but this is just kind of an example because I don't want to go over like other events right now. But basically what you can do is you can have a Boolean variable, so you define it outside the function so it can be accessed, and whenever this button is clicked, you can set this to true and then make it so that this function will only run if the bool is true, and then you can set it back to false once it runs. So that way you have only one connection for each event. It's not connecting multiple times, and you'll check to make sure that the person has already clicked it first before they trigger any code inside of this event connection, right? Another way is you could actually keep it inside of here, and the reason is because the connection method will actually return the connection, so that the connection can actually be stored inside of a variable. So in order for us to just store this connection, all we have to do is take a variable and set it to equal to, and then we just make our reference to event and connect it, and the connect method will return the connection to our variable. And now what we can do with this connection is we can actually make we can reference our variable and we can disconnect it, and what that'll do is that'll disconnect our connection from the event. So now if I go ahead and make something like print1 and we run it, and I'll go ahead and add a view to the output. Actually, I don't think this is gonna work. Yeah, no, this isn't gonna work because it disconnects our event before the code actually runs, before the connection is actually used. And I guess that might work. so we'll try it like this instead. So it doesn't work the first time, but the second time we click, it presses 1 because the first time it's making the connection, and then the second time it's listening on that connection, and then it triggers. And then we click it, and you can see it doesn't keep multiplying because we disconnect it after we use it, but it does keep working like it's supposed to, right? It only works a single time, as expected. Now you can imagine this method is kind of more messy than if you just defined it outside, but it's just something to know for some use cases maybe. So that's pretty much it for that. You can also use a proximity prompt, which is kind of similar to a click detector, and has similar events. I'm not going to go over it in full detail, but if we go ahead and add it to our part, and we can make a reference to it, and I'll just show you some of the events. So we do prompt dot, and then you can see we got more different events. So now we got triggered, and there should be more. Trigger ended, prompt hidden. What else is there? Prompt button hold began, prompt button hold ended, right? And now if you want to know how to detect something happening or like an event happening, all you have to do is just go to Google, right? And you just type in you know, what you're looking for, and then like event name or something like that, like Roblox Studio proximity prompt events or something like that, and you can find some documentation which will give you detailed explanations on events and what they will do for like specific times and different events that you can use that you might need in your case. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to make a script now. So what I'm going to ask you to make is basically a part, or like kind of like a button, and default it's red, but once you click it, it'll go to green, and then once you click it again, it'll go back to red, and you can keep clicking it to toggle or change its color, basically turn it on or off, right? So that's pretty much the script. Obviously you're using a click detector. Yeah, so you can pause the video here and try and make that on your own. It's okay if you can't. Just give it a try, see what you can do, how far you get, and I'll show you my script in a few seconds, so I'll give you some time to pause and try it on your own. Alright, so I'm going to show you my script now. So hopefully you tried it on your own. I encourage you to challenge yourself, but here's my script. It's not too complicated, right? It's just a if statement and a boolean value, variable that we're changing its value. So we have a value, or a variable I mean, that's called toggled, and we're setting it to false by default. We're initializing it to false, and we're listening to the mouse click event with our connect function, and we're checking if not toggled. So if not toggled is just checking to see if toggled is false. So if toggled is false, then we set it to green. Otherwise, we'll set it to red. And then at the end here, we have toggled equals not toggled. So we can use the not operator when we're setting values for variables, and we can kind of get the opposite. So it's very good for boolean variables, which are either false or true. So we can set it to the opposite, so it pretty much just reverses the value of toggled, so that way, you know, it just changes it. Instead of us doing toggled equals true in here and toggled equals false in here, we just have one line changing it, which is a little bit more cleaner for our code, right? If that doesn't make sense, you know, you could just, you know, not toString. I'm having some issues here. Alright. You can just do if toggled equals true, if toggled equals false, and it'll be the same thing. So if you have that, you know, you're fine. But obviously I'm not expecting you to know this. I'm just kind of showing you a different way of doing it that's a little bit more efficient and easier to read, really. So that's pretty much how you do it, you know. See, I'll show you. You go into workspace, we can see, where did I go? Click box over here. You can see I can select it, and I can see the script inside of it. which is this, and once ever we click it, it just changes. Pretty simple, right? So that's it for this video. That's events. They aren't really too complicated. They're pretty easy to understand, hopefully. If you don't understand, it's alright, you can always ask questions or whatever, but that's it for this video, and I'll see you guys later.